Good day, everyone. Welcome to our first Next in Agri-Food webinar series. I'm your National Chair, Robert Menzies. I hope you're all doing well today. This is our first of a four-part series that CAMA National, along with our provincial chapters, are doing over the next few months. Thanks for joining. I'm co-hosting today with our provincial chapter of Saskatchewan, who will be joining us in a little bit. I wanted to just do a shout out to some of our participants today that have decided to spend a little bit of money and more importantly, their time with us based on this really great presentation that we're going to be hearing in a few minutes. So we've got a great contingent today from the canola family across the country with Canola Council of Canada, Canadian Canola Growers Association, and a couple of the provincial groups, Alberta and Manitoba. So thank you for joining us. Got a few people from Brett Young Seeds, so thank you for joining us as well. We have a great contingent from FCC, lots of folks joining us, so thank you for that. We've got some representation today from Federated Co-op. We've also got some Saskatchewan Pulse Growers people here with us today as well. And then thanks to our sponsors, which I'll talk about in a little bit, we've got a number of students joining us from across the country as well, from a couple of universities, including Dalhousie University of Winnipeg. So thank you for those students. And they're able to join us complimentary today due to our sponsor commitment to this event. This is our first national event that we're hosting since our name change and our mandate evolution. And many of you are probably familiar with that, but we do have a lot of people joining us today that are not members. Of course, we encourage you to become members of CAMA. And so what we noticed a handful of years ago was that the two ends of the value chain were coming closer and closer together. And CAMA wanted to be on the forefront of this trend and ultimately be as credible and relevant for our members as possible. And so that started a lengthy process where we've evolved our mandate, which included a new name, as well as a new brand, and as mentioned, involved mandate. And so I think that this is a great example of how the ends of the value chain are coming together with this presenter in particular. CAMA is made up of provincial chapters. There's 5 across the province, and those are really our boots on ground for showing value to our members in their respective provinces. We are organization, a niche kind of within a niche where we are marketers and communicators and branders within the agri-food industry. And our ultimate goal is to be providing value and grow their skills of our members and encourage and expand their passion for marketing and communications within the agri-food space. So if you're not a member, go to our website and join, please. So our Next in Agri-Food webinar series is, as mentioned, a 4-part series. And our next one up is going to be March 10th, which is going to be featuring Village Brewery, which is a leader in Alberta's craft beer scene. So you can check your email over the next handful of weeks for some details. The date, I believe, is March the 10th for that. Going to be an interesting presentation from those individuals. And we are doing our best to figure out how we can have a virtual beer tasting, but we might not be successful, but stay tuned if we're able to figure something out. All right, I want to go on to our social. So we have, with our relaunch, brand evolution, we do have a new national Twitter. So if you're not already following us, please do so. You can see that on the screen. And also with our LinkedIn company page as well. So participate in the conversation, both live for this session, as well as just seeing what's happening within the agri-food space across the country. As mentioned, we've got some event sponsors for this Next in Agri-Food webinar series. So I want to do a special shout out to them. As you can see on your screen, 6P Marketing, Protein Industries Canada, and Top Crop Manager. Their financial support not only supports our webinar series, but also CAMA to implement and expand our offerings to members, as well as mentioned earlier, allowing us to reach out to the post-secondary universities and colleges across the country and have as many students that are entering the agri-food industry in some capacity to join us for this series at no charge. So thank you to them. In addition, I always want to recognize our sustaining partners. These individuals, organizations on your screen, they're inaugural partners who have joined the National Sustaining Partner Program. So they're committed to our ongoing focus of ensuring CAMA continues to be dynamic and credible and really relevant for Canada's agri-food marketers and communicators. Our 5 committed partners, AdFarm, AGI, Bayer, Glacier Farm Media, and Real Agriculture. I want to thank these companies for their ongoing support of CAMA. I'll ask Severine to turn on her camera and unmute herself at this point. Many of us are familiar with Canada's Agriculture Day in February. And so I want to welcome Severine Lavoie, who is the Communications Manager with the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity. CCFI is the new organizers behind Canada's Agriculture Day, and we thought with the event coming up shortly, and many of you already participating or need to be participating in this day, that Severine could give us a refresher in terms of what we can expect and how we can participate.
Thank you, Robert. Canada's Ag Day is coming up pretty soon. So I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the results from 2021, which were pretty amazing, and also a reminder about the objectives and how to participate. Next slide. So in 2021, we had a very successful Canada's Ag Day. The day was trending #1 on Twitter at 7:30 a.m. Next. It was so successful, trending so high that Twitter wrote a description about Canada's Agriculture Day to explain the trend to everyone on Twitter. This is just to give you an idea of how it went last year, and hopefully it will go the same in 2022. Next. And it's celebrated in Canada as well as in 68 other countries. The performance is pretty high. It was trending for 6 hours at #1 for a total of 17 hours. And the reach was pretty impressive as well in 2021 with 35 million people and also 101 million Twitter impressions. So a recap about the purpose and the goal. So still the same, to celebrate Canadian agriculture and the people who produce our food. The main audience is the agri-food industry, but it trends so high on social media that we are successful in connecting with the consumers with the ag industry. Just a quick recap of the key messages. I'm sure a lot of people on this webinar have heard me talk about this before. So the main key message is living within the Canadian agriculture community is special and should be celebrated. And it allows us to engage in a positive dialogue around ag and food, which creates trust between Canadian agriculture and consumers. Next. So a few ideas of how to get involved. You can visit our website. There's a few resources on there. We've added a few graphics, so you can post a fork selfie, you can post a video message, you can create something new, or you can use something that's already existing. And some organizations are also planning virtual activities. So however you celebrate on social media, just make sure to use the hashtag Canadian Ag Day. And these are just to give you a few examples. So we've added the animated GIFs. These were produced by a group of students recently, and they are available on our website as well. In 2021, there were around 50 activities that were organized by associations and organizations. So these are just a a few to give you some examples. So conferences, virtual farm tours, virtual cook-alongs. So hopefully this year we'll have a lot of activities on the program. And on social media, these are a few examples of what happened in 2021. So exciting tweets from big consumer brands, McDonald's, Cavendish, Chapman. So that's always nice. And a few of them have confirmed that they will be participating this year as well. So a lot of visibility for the day. And we have our government influencers as well. So we've reached out to many of them, and they will be present this year as well. So we are looking forward to that as well. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me either by email, on the phone, or through social media. Thank you.
Thanks, Ebrin. We obviously encourage all of our members and everyone on the webinar today to participate and celebrate in the Agri-Food conversation on the 22nd. We'd also like to encourage you to check out the FCC events that also is occurring on the February 22nd. Let's explore the future of food. Great lineup of speakers here. So check out their website to register for that event. All right, I'll ask Janice this time to share her camera and unmute herself. So just a few housekeeping items for everyone today. Questions, we love questions. Please ask them in the Q&A box today as you're hearing from Murad, our guest speaker. We will answer those questions in a Q&A after his formal presentation. The webinar is being recorded, and as you probably likely know, it will be from past webinars. It will be emailed out to you, sent out to you after this webinar within a 24-hour period. We'll also be sending all participants a follow-up survey. We really love feedback, knowing that there's some unfamiliar faces in the webinar today as well. We'd love to hear about what your first experience was with CAMA, and also for our tried and true members as well, always looking for your feedback to make sure we are in fact providing that value that you're looking for from CAMA. And then CAMA Saskatchewan chapter rep is Janice Thorogan. She works at FCC, and she's going to introduce our keynote speaker today. Janice.
Thanks, Robert. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today. Murad Al-Katib is President and CEO of AGT Foods and Ingredients Incorporated. He's an entrepreneur and a strategic business and financial thinker in international agri-food community trading. With the joint venture partnership announcement between Federated Co-op and AGT Foods to construct a $2 billion renewable diesel and canola crushing facility, he said, agriculture is at the forefront of many global challenges and is providing societal solutions to global protein requirements, food, and renewable fuel supplies. We're pleased to have Murad here to share his insights, and please welcome Murad.
Thank you very much, Janice. Thank you very much for having me on this first webinar series for CAMA, and very excited to be here to share a few insights with you today. So I'm going to cut right into my presentation, and then we'll have time at the end for some Q&A. So just wanted to kind of start with a little bit about who is AGT, for those of you who are not maybe from Saskatchewan and from the West. AGT is a value-added processing company based in Regina. We actually are a Canadian startup that actually grew to be, quite a global champion in the value-added processing of pulse crops. That's where we got our start. So we have about 45 facilities in 5 continents, 6 kind of key agricultural production regions, about 1.85 billion in sales. I started in the basement of my house 20 years ago. So July of 2021 was quite monumental, as our 20th anniversary. We now have about 2,500 employees located around the world. We're a private company again now. We were listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange for many years, and we privatized with Fairfax Financial and the Ontario Pension. Getting some very strong partners into understanding the opportunity in agriculture. And so again, our management team is kind of leading a global growth strategy. So you can see from our map that, we have a very strong concentration of our assets in Western Canada. And so Canada is kind of, what I would say the heart of our company. And then we have a number of geographies that form the other organs of our body. And so, we have a very diverse footprint, including processing plants, value-added processing, transportation, logistics, and a whole bunch of other things. So we'll talk a bit about that. Just to kind of start to set the stage for what we're going to talk about today. The United Nations FAO, basically lays out for us that when we look at the societal trends on population and income and the global growth of requirement for food, we need to produce in the next 40 years the equivalent of all the food produced in the last 10,000 years of civilization. Now that really does show the scale of agriculture and what I would call both the opportunity, but also the challenge as we go forward, to be able to meet kind of these global agri-food market dynamics. The important dynamic for Canada is not only the global growth in population, that population that's forecast now to rise to nearly 10 billion, from 9 billion that were projected maybe a few years back. So even again, further and higher. But really, that growth in food supply is also going to be transforming because of middle class spending. An important trend for Canada would be, let's say, 33 trillion in middle class spending in Asia by 2030. Again, those are kind of trends that I say without a lot of risk that Canada will be serving a consumer in the future who may be completely different than the consumer we're feeding today. So as we move from what I would call to be a commodity-based agricultural sector to a value-added, refined and semi-refined ingredient and product market, we ultimately will be playing more into that income trend and also this growth driver of health, nutrition, and sustainability. So markets like Europe, North America, China, the rest of Asia are transforming into markets where sustainability is very, very important. And we're going to talk more about that as we move along through this presentation. Now, we all know, many of us in agriculture know the sustainability story of Western Canada. And, again, I think that it's quite important to recognize that we have a 3-crop rotation. We have cereals, oil seeds, canola, and pulses. And, when I was a child growing up in Davidson, Saskatchewan, my little community of 1,200 people, we grew cereal and we grew canola. And then from there, we had summer fallow. So black dirt soil naturally replenishing as a result of the nutrient depletion, the hard nature, extra nitrogen we needed to use to grow oil seeds. We had to have summer fallow. Today, we plant a legume, lentils, peas, chickpeas, and beans. Those naturally fix the nitrogen in the soil. When we combine them with zero minimum tillage, soil management, and digital agriculture and agronomic practices that we're practicing in the Western Canadian system, we end up with a water efficient, low carbon, low energy requirement agricultural rotation that really gives us a sustainability profile that allows us to have carbon footprint index products that are very, very competitive when it comes to the global trend for plant-based protein and plant-based foods. So, when I look at, overall the work I've done, let's say some of the work I did as the chair of the National Strategy Table on Agriculture and the representative of agriculture on the Industry Strategy Council for the Government of Canada, I always like to start with our asset list. So why is Canada really an important partner when it comes to agri-food? Let's start with the very first bullet here. Abundant natural resources are a key to our competitive advantage. The world is scarce of really, I would say, 3 main things: water, land, and scale. And scale really plays into the technology and innovation and digitization side. Imagine implementing digitization and technology in 1-acre farms in India versus our ability to implement on large broad acre crops that we're doing in particular in the Canadian landscape. The way that our available land and water interact with producers who are early adopters of technology, the linkages and networks to R&D facilities, reliable capital input, political goodwill and stability, low pesticide use per acre, strong primary and secondary sectors, and really a consumer base in Canada that allows us to test any product we want. You want to grow a product that you're going to export and you're going to produce that product and it's going to go to Asia, you could do market testing in GTA, in Vancouver, in Calgary. We have consumer bases that are ethnically diverse all throughout our country. This gives us a product development and a marketing advantage as we go forward. But I also want to talk about our liabilities or our barriers. Our agricultural value chain is relatively underdeveloped. Only 50% of our agricultural production is processed. We have a lack of investment in processing infrastructure, in particular in high value, innovative technologies for production of ingredients, packaged foods, and more refined agricultural commodities into food products. We're relatively speaking, we're low productivity. We think that we're doing well. Our lands are relatively marginal in some cases. So we're doing great in terms of, being relatively productive on marginal lands, but, digital technologies and, sensors and data collection and artificial intelligence, machine learning, predictive analytics, decision support systems will allow us to have productivity enhancing technologies. Government's been spending mostly on risk management instead of productivity. And we are severely underrepresented for Indigenous, First Nations, youth, and women in agriculture. Again, three, subgroups that are incredibly important to realizing the full potential of this sector. Canada lacks trade agreements with important major markets, China, India, Japan, as an example. We're hoping the India side is going to move with an early harvest agreement and something that will move towards a comprehensive economic trade agreement. But, again, our EU agreement is there, but it needs to be fully utilized. So we've had too much of a focus with the disruption in the pandemic, on inwards looking, obviously necessarily with the pandemic, but we need to recognize that international market access, predictable tariff, non-tariff, and regulatory systems are going to be key to the development of our sector. And our regulatory burden in our country is dramatic. It's a dramatic inhibitor to the growth of our sector. And the siloed approach, no pun intended, of Health Canada, CFIA, Canadian Grain Commission, the regulators in food and agriculture are leading to an environment where we're not nimble. It's easier to develop and launch products in the United States than it is in Canada, and that's problematic. Technology is going to be the generational shift in our sector. As I said, the ability to implement on widespread broad acre crops, the IoT, sensors, data collection, blockchain, to have tamper-proof digital ledgers that give us truly traceable and food-safe products, right from the input suppliers to off-takers in the value chain. Important when we talk about the measurement of carbon intensity of agriculture will be technology. Gone are the days of anecdotal marketing. Too many special interest groups are anecdotally marketing today. They're marketing to fear. The only way agriculture can truly take its important position is to capture its data and to be able to communicate clearly facts. So I think this is really a generational opportunity and a market shift in the sophistication and the execution ability of our sector. When I want you to look at the sky, you're all marketers and communicators in agriculture. I want you to look at the sky and see the world. I don't want you to just see the clouds in the sky. I want you to recognize that when I was a child, we were considered the breadbasket of the world. Well, today, Canada has a food brand, and Canadian ingredients and food have a reputation of safety, quality, and trustworthiness. And the opportunity today is for Canada to become the first stop on the protein highway, and how that links to the Silk Road in Asia. That will define our ability to capture that growing middle-class income spending. So this is kind of, the heart of the presentation here is when I look at the opportunity in agricultural production and the cropping side, in particular, what I see is the opportunity that, again, is a generational opportunity in plant-based foods, right? We have the 3 crop rotation. So plant-based foods, meaning pulses, wheat, and then canola. So we've got the cereal, pulse, and canola rotation. And the opportunity in this is the ability to develop and grow plant-based foods, renewable fuels, and biomass. And when I look at that particular opportunity, again, biomass, let's just talk about what we're talking about here. We're talking about, the utilization of waste products. So whether it be a biomass from wood, garbage crops, fuels, gas, landfill gas, those kinds of things, to create inputs for other processes, whether it be for pulp and paper alternatives, whether it be for heating fuel alternatives, pellets, those types of things. I'm going to just, I'm going to come back to biomass, but I really want to start with the pulses side and kind of talking a little bit about the pulse and food trend. And, what we're seeing, in the plant-based food side is we're seeing a market shift with consumer trends. Protein has a positive dietary image, right? Vegetarian or really flexitarian diets with vegetable proteins derived from other sources is growing. I'm not suggesting that consumers are going to become vegetarians or vegans. I'm talking about a desire to have variety and alternatives. There seems to be more of a willingness to try plant-based foods, and a rise in allergy to certain food and ingredients is actually leading to a rise in looking for new alternatives. Let's say maybe moving away from existing alternatives in soy into looking at things like peas and lentils and chickpeas and beans. Now, the food company trends are also moving in a direction where non-GMO, gluten-free, vegetarian, sustainably sourced ingredients, clean label foods really, are gaining traction, and high protein claims are common. Ingredients derived by vegetables are growing. Now, this is, again, I say the word plant-based versus vegan. The opportunity in this sector is not a niche market to a point of vegan lifestyle. It's really a plant-based is a positive dietary choice that could fit into a wide variety of diets. So again, we saw it grow to 12 billion by 2019, and it's forecast again to take another big growth up to 28 billion by 2025. Any sector where you see multi-billion-dollar growth in food, in such a short period, is a sector that has a true consumer trend behind it. Now, what's driving this on the Canadian context is, again, Canadian insights show that, consumers are intending to increase plant-based food consumption. 17% of consumers think plant-based proteins offer higher nutrition. The population wants to follow a diet that restricts meat partially or completely, right? Others are looking for alternatives. And part of this is health, objectives, whether it be weight control, lowering of saturated fats and cholesterol, cost considerations, right? That's one of the things that we have to be very sensitive about as we market and develop these food products. Let's not make any mistake. All of these trends are positive, but at the end of the day, these products have to taste good and they have to be affordable. And we have to work on, understanding that the taste profile of these products have to fit into mainstream tastes. So what are we doing, in terms of looking at those opportunities? And where I see, the development of the protein-based ingredients and the plant-based food sector in Canada is that, again, when we look at pulses as an example, snack foods, meat analogs, batters, breadings, pastas and extruded products, dairy replacements, and pet foods are where we're seeing the largest amount of growth in driving that multi-billion-dollar opportunity. So, as a company, we've reacted. What we've done is we've invested not only in the fractionation plant, so we're now producing protein concentrates, starch concentrates, fibers, flours, and different products that can be used in all of these applications. But we've made the next step into actually producing texturized pulses proteins. So we're actually extruding these products now into chunk strip slices and granules. And we're now into the production of alternatives on both the dry texturized proteins and the high moisture meat analogs that are allowing us to move into this opportunity, in particular on the alternative plant-based meat sector. Now, part of what we have to recognize is that as we develop these products, we have all these co-products. We have to ensure that we're using them. So our company, we've actually went now to developing, high concentration ingredients that are made with the starches and the flours that are left over from the protein extraction. And so whether we're using it in biomass or whether we're using it in further food processing, we need to ensure what I call total plant utilization. So, you see Kashi Go launched with our ingredients recently. You look at a number of different food products that are out on the markets today, and they're starting to become tastier and they're starting to certainly become more affordable. So the plant-based food opportunity is certainly part of our future as we develop out that opportunity. I want to switch gears to our announcement last Monday, on the Federated Co-op AGT announcement of the $2 billion canola oil project and the canola protein and renewable fuels opportunity. This is a very exciting project for me in my career, in that, I grew up as a young man, endearing the Federated Co-op system, as one that was really deep in rural communities. I told the story at our announcement that, when I was a kid growing up in Davidson, I would walk into our local co-op and our family co-op number was 8. So we were family 8 in the Davidson co-op system. That again, kind of came to the rural foundation of building communities. This project is about co-locating a purpose-built canola crushing facility to directly pipeline service the Federated Co-op feedstock requirement to actually produce 1 billion liters of renewable diesel. And, we actually talk about what we call an integrated agricultural complex. This is not a fuels project. This is an integrated agriculture project. We're going to be linking, the farm inputs, digital agriculture, the sensor and data collection, the measurement of carbon intensity, in the existing canola production through our system at AGT, into, what we would kind of call, the oil extraction. And then we're going to put that into the renewable side. And then we're going to take the diesel back to the farm again. And we're going to utilize this incredibly far-reaching Federated Co-op network in Western Canada, which is in 600 communities, from Thunder Bay all the way through Western Canada. We're going to put that fuel back to the farm, and we're going to assist in agriculture being a major user of renewable diesel, and along with the transportation industry, to actually look at a decarbonization of the way that agriculture and the transportation industry operate in our sector. Now, we're not done there. We're going to take the meal and co-product, and we're actually going to, form a further venture with Federated Co-op, and we're going to have an enhanced eatable protein production company that's going to be focused on aquaculture, enhanced protein products for food products, and also higher value feed ingredients that are going to be going back in to the food system. The enhanced eatable protein production company is a big part of the offset of the canola impact of going into renewables. We believe that the future of food is to make protein more bioavailable and digestible and have a higher productivity in the food system than currently just putting it into dairy feed or just into general feed commodity use. So that's what this project is going to do. You may ask yourself, why canola? It's readily available. In Western Canada, the fields of canola are akin to an oil producing nation's oil fields. The only big advantage we have is every year we renew with a new crop. So every year those oil fields get replenished. So, we are set again by 2025 to increase canola by another 40%, another 8 million tons. We have a proven canola-based biofuel that's ready to use. Canada, will reduce its carbon emissions by 4.4 megatons. It's very efficient, and canola-based fuels have the ability to reduce GHGs by 90% when compared to petroleum-based fuels. There's a path directly in our joint venture with Federated that's been granted by the BC government. We're expecting pathways in other state governments where canola will have, in Western Canada, a carbon intensity that will give it a boost over almost any other feedstock on the production of renewables in the world. This is an exciting opportunity. So, that sustainability, when we combine it with conservation, no-tilling farm practices, soil management, on-farm fuel use, soil quality, reduction of erosion, and boost in soil carbon sequestration, these are the kind of projects that will dramatically increase the production, but also lower the carbon intensity. We have some important assets that we're offering into this project. We're very excited about the Lake Diefenbaker irrigation project, a proposed $5 billion project in Saskatchewan. And if you look at our short-line railway system, it is the short-line railway system that services the proposed Lake Diefenbaker irrigation area. So we do believe that, again, an irrigated acres in that area, will have a dramatic boost potentially on canola yields in that particular region, and further provide us insulation about dryness and drought-related conditions like we saw in this year. So we're very excited about infrastructure meeting the building out of new agricultural systems and how that links into the whole renewable fuel side. And that protein opportunity that we talked about, the main challenge for canola protein isolate is the thermal treatment and damage to proteins during a crush process. We're going to be looking at alternative crush processes that will allow the canola proteins to be able to be preserved. And again, we've got regulatory paths to using this, very balanced amino acid profiles, in particular when we combine them with other ingredients like pulses. And that gives canola, with its brand recognition as a healthy oil, to what we will consider to be a very, very friendly received product into the food industry in North America, in Asia, and in Latin and South America. Those will be major targets for us on the canola, monetization side. Now, aquaculture is the other. Today there's a shortage of fish meal in the world. There's no more schools of fish. Overfishing has been a problem, and farmed salmon, tilapia, and shrimp production are growing dramatically. With the concern on soy production in South America and the deforestation of rainforests, canola is the perfect alternative to dominate the aquaculture industry for protein as the aquaculture industry grows. So this will be an important part of Canada shifting its canola meal from just dairy cattle feed into much higher uses in the food and aquaculture and value-added feed ingredient segments. This is all under the umbrella of ESG. And, environment, social, and governance is very important to both Federated Co-op and AGT. And, it ultimately is an important part of what we're doing as a company to transform ourselves in our next 20 years. We're a world leader in closing the protein deficit in global diets. Our customers look to us to provide high quality, healthy, plant-based ingredients that are sustainable, planet-friendly packaged foods, and planet-friendly ingredients. And we believe that plants and biomass can provide the base material for sustainable foods and feeds. And we have an active program to utilize this. I'll give you an example. We're just building now in Rosetown, Saskatchewan, a biomass manufacturing facility that's going to be taking lentil hulls, pea hulls, oat hulls, and other agricultural biomass. It's going to combine it with micronutrients, and it's going to produce a pellet that we're going to be encouraging our farmers to put back in the soil that will basically return 300 kgs of carbon into the soil for every ton of application. We believe over a research cycle will have a very dramatic reduction in nitrogen fertilizer use, and the fiber and the cellulose from the biomass will encapsulate the micronutrients and make them bioavailable to the roots. These are important projects. So these are kind of, financially what are going to lead us to become a more valuable company and meet the needs of our consumer. So, as a strategy in the country, we've been focusing on regulation, innovation, labor force development, state-of-the-art infrastructure on both digital and physical. And, we have to diversify Canada's agri-food markets. That's the opportunity here. So, the strategy council that I took part in, leveled its recommendations. And again, we kind of outlined agriculture 2.0, the next generation, as planned trade corridors and gateways, digital, agile regulations. We need to reskill and skill our youth, our First Nations. We need to have more participation of women, as I mentioned. We need to capture the value-added opportunity and use that rich renewable potential of agriculture to tackle the decarbonization. There's never been a time in the world where food has been more important geopolitically. And I think that that's, kind of the conclusion of the presentation. The global race to protein is on. Canada has a strong agri-food brand. Fundamentally, our demand growth is there through populations and incomes. And we're in an innovation and scaling food processing sector. We need that to be successful. Data will drive it. New markets exist. We just have to grab them. And I believe strongly that in this race, right, companies that play in multiple links in the value chain will ultimately win that race. So I'm going to stop there and I'll turn it back over to our moderator.
Thank you, Murad. Interesting presentation. A couple takeaways for me was I'm mourning a little bit that no longer the breadbasket of the world. Mourning that, but the first stop on the protein highway is not a bad alternative. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment with the question that we've got here. Also, Canada's canola oil fields and thinking about canola as an oil field is very interesting and sustainably replenished each year. I wanted to talk about regarding the value add product. And I think we talk about this quite a bit within the agri-food industry about that value add. I know provinces and even nationally, federally, there are goals and hopes, and Protein Industries Canada is an example of an action that has come out of that. What's missing for Canada right now to be that value added product superpower?
I think, Robert, one of the things that's critical here is that, like I was one of the architects of writing and securing the PIC project. And, it was about kind of stimulating that innovation ecosystem, getting people to work together. Our sector is extremely fragmented, right? People are doing their own thing. What that does is it actually gives us a critical disadvantage on scale. So again, I always say, Robert, you can either buy scale, build scale, or partner scale. Now, what happens usually is Canadians are good innovators, and then we're bought and we get integrated into somebody else's global system of innovation. So Canada doesn't get the benefits of scaling. What we're trying to encourage now is, more partnering for scale. And I think that that's going to be a critical part of seizing this opportunity. We can't forget that if land and water are critical elements, that's not going to be created in other jurisdictions easily. So when we have the infrastructure gap that we have, imagine the infrastructure gap in Kazakhstan, and imagine how far they have to come to catch up to Canada. So we have to keep taking steps forward in terms of scaling. I think that's really critical because this plant-based opportunity, both on the food, fuel, and fiber side, is a real opportunity that will emerge and evolve over the next decade and 2 decades. If we don't grab the opportunity, another country and region will. So, I see the Australians aggressive, the Americans are aggressive. And, again, we're going to see more and more competition, out of European companies trying to grab this opportunity. So, I think that, again, we've got the political will, we have the scale. We just need, to ensure that we're working towards commercialization. And, we got to work on cost competitiveness, we got to work on taste, and we got to work on getting products to market.
On the note of scale, so you connected scale to digitization, and maybe scale is more than that, but you specifically referenced digitization. So who in Canada is leading that charge right now from your perspective?
Well, again, there's a lot of issues around that. I think that, you're going to continue. Let's just get right down to the foundation. Without proper rural broadband access in our country, we're not going to be able to seize the opportunity presented by digital agriculture. And, again, our government and our governments, let's say that way, we saw in the last budget responding to the Industry Strategy Council recommendations, acceleration of the digital broadband access targets from 2030 accelerated to 2026. That's a good thing. But if we don't have it, we can't run a global digital agriculture platform that will ultimately feed data into a sustainable food system from Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, and Montreal, right? We need places like Davidson, Saskatchewan that need proper internet access. So that's, kind of critical at the beginning. What I said about scale is that we've got large scale agriculture where, again, it will justify the costs of implementing the infrastructure on the farm level. When you're putting in sensors and data collection, weather stations, Again, we have farm families around, West Central Saskatchewan who are farming 120 to 140,000 acres per year, right? These again are large farms that have 5 or 6 full-time IT people working on those farms. So that's the opportunity, is to take that into the food system and actually, be able to take this smartphone and be able to scan a product and actually have traceable data right back to the farm. That's what the consumer is going to demand in a food safe system.
So on that note of the farm gate and the integration and the obviously the important role that the farmer plays, I'm assuming AGT is, among others, are working with farmers, commodity groups. How much are you seeing or needing what farmers are essentially planting to help this shift to support the market opportunity?
Well, that's one of our big advantages, is we're not, Robert, changing the agronomic system in Western Canada. We have a 3-crop rotation of cereals, pulses, and canola. So, ultimately what we're doing, and what others like Viterra and Richardson and, other large players are doing, is we're attempting to influence acres within the rotation. Again, we're seeing now that farmers have ingrained this rotation because it makes sense from a return perspective. They might cheat a bit on their rotation and push it, but ultimately they're going to go to a 3-crop rotation maybe every 4 years instead of every 3 years. So they might double up once, but it's about, are they going to grow lentils or peas or chickpeas? Are they going to grow durum or Canadian milling wheat, right, in those rotations? Canola is set. What we need to do on canola is, again, the plan on our side is working with the federated system, and the reach of the rural service centers of federated and our grain origination is, we're going to push seed, chemical, fertilizer, digital agriculture, the measurement of carbon intensity, and the ability to put fuel back to them as a way to create a sustainable system that's going to lower the carbon intensity of their crops, which ultimately should lead to a positive return on price, and maybe one day carbon credits that will be worth something to the farmer.
David asked a question. You may have actually just indirectly answered it in terms of new crop opportunities as it relates to climate change. And anything specifically do you want? I want to. A follow-up question is going to be about agriculture being a broader reach, and I want to talk to you about your ESG initiatives, which involve environmental challenges, obviously. But do you want to speak specifically to?
Yeah, Robert. Climate change is real. We're seeing it today, and again, what we're taking as a company is again, we have to react to the situations at hand. What we're seeing again in our global platform is more drought volatility. Right, we're seeing more frequent droughts, in particular in our southern hemisphere business. So, the Australian side is more volatile. We're seeing India, Turkey, places like that, where the temperatures are getting hotter during their harvest periods. They're becoming more weather susceptible. Right, in Saskatchewan or in Western Canada, what we're seeing is actually a bit of a shift over in risk. We're seeing a bit more drought risk and variance in rain patterns. But what we're also seeing is a larger number of frost-free days. So what, it seems to be more shifting is, again, as I was a kid, it was always the August harvest moon where we were worried about frost risk. Well, again, not that the frost risk is gone in Western Canada, but it seems to be much more about rain at harvest now, not frost at harvest anymore. So we're seeing kind of, quality susceptibility of crops being more of a concern. I think that the longer growing season is going to be one that's likely going to de-risk in the near term. But I think that's where irrigation projects and other things where we can control the elements are going to become more and more important as we get more volatility.
Canadian Agri-Food is great at many things. One of those is research into the seed and then ultimately the grain as it relates to increasing high protein in many of the commodities you talked about. So Braden wants to know any insight on the new high protein canola seeds that are being developed by various players in Canada.
Yeah, again, from the perspective of what we're doing, in particular, you start with higher protein, you end with higher protein, and which means you have more protein to concentrate or isolate. So, again, the higher protein canola varieties will ultimately feed into canola food offerings on either the oil or on the extracted proteins and associated co-products that we ultimately think are going to be desirable. So we do think that, as we get more into the fractionation and milling of pulses and canola, that, again, trait-related breeding and agronomy are going to be really key to managing and trying to raise those protein bars, as we get moving forward. So like, wheat has been traded on protein for years. We think that those other commodities will ultimately start to attract protein premiums over time.
Shifting gears a little bit here, a question from Rick. And so you made a number of announcements in your presentation about investments in Saskatchewan in particular. So Rick wants to know can you address a large problem of depopulation in rural Western Canada, specifically shrinking of hundreds of small communities across the West? And how do you believe that the initiatives that AGT is investing is that going to help reverse that trend in terms of population and skills and talent?
I think, Robert, it's profoundly upon the agriculture sector to recognize that the creation of value-added opportunities and returning that back to rural areas will create jobs that will ultimately keep people or bring them back to their communities. And again, I look at my community of Davidson, halfway between Saskatoon and Regina. When I was growing up in Davidson, my mother was the mayor of our community, and it was in the 1980s, where again, it was a critical time in agriculture. The wooden elevators were all closing, and it was the race for the concrete terminals. And Davidson won a race and secured 2 concrete terminals in our region. And that was, what we viewed as the ability to keep our hospital open, our school open, and jobs on Main Street. We see the same thing in value-added agriculture today. We have to produce value-added products, which ultimately, may not mean that the facility that's processing that is in rural Saskatchewan or rural Alberta or rural Manitoba, but it will mean that the value we're creating, if we link it back to the farm gate, will create additional wealth in those communities. That's, kind of, again, with the federated co-op partnership, that's what attracted us to each other. We each have a view that building communities is our job. And, you got to return it back. And it's all about, why do we see, MBAs going back to run their family farms today? Because these aren't farms anymore. They're corporations. They're ultimately big business. And that's what I think we need is scale. And we need to create those opportunities that are real, and we need to share them.
You spoke about agriculture having such a broad reach now, even more than the last decade or so. And you talked about food security, those ESG initiatives, protein deficiency, energy, fuel opportunities. So for the audience who's being inspired by you and AGT today, what's the role that other agribusiness and agri organizations can play as it relates to almost the repositioning of agri-food in Canada?
Well, and Robert, you've just taken my answer, which is, again, I say that the challenge, the call to action is, go home, tell your sons, your daughters, your nieces, your nephews, your neighbors' kids that agriculture ain't what it used to be, right? Agriculture today is at the forefront of society's solution to climate change, decarbonization, right? Feeding that protein deficit. Geopolitically, I say, when a baby is hungry, they cry. When a young man is hungry and unemployed in the world, they protest. Right? Civil obedience and civil institutions in the world and geopolitical stability will be hinged in the post-pandemic economy on food availability, food inflation, and food affordability. This means that agriculture becomes even more important. Why did Canada sit on the global stage as such a heavy hitter for so many years? It was, again, because of our Canadian approach, but it was also because we were the breadbasket of the world. Okay, and agriculture gave Canada a geopolitical importance that I think is coming back today. So we're urging our political leadership to recognize the role agriculture plays in increasing Canada's stature in the world, And again, what I want, the agriculture marketers and promoters that are in your membership to do in their organizations is toot the horn, because it's pretty darned exciting. And we've seen it, Robert, in the way governments are approaching our sector. The Strategic Innovation Fund in the last budget was replenished with $5 billion. Agriculture was included for the first time in our history, along with automotive, aerospace, and life sciences. Wow, talk about 3 Eastern Canadian sectors, right? And now agriculture, right? We're prominent in the decarbonization fund of the government today. That's a marked shift in the way we're communicating to the political leadership, and we need to communicate to the public at large. That's what the call to action is here.
You mentioned students next generation, and so you've spoken in the past about you like to get in front of students multiple times a year.
Yep.
Why is that so important to you personally?
Well, again, it's I was a young man who started a company in the basement of my house. I'd love to be, responsible one day for inspiring that next leader who decides to take that plunge. And I think it's 2 things. It's inspiring entrepreneurship. It's taking out the stigma that you can't be internationally successful sitting in Canada, right? Again, I'm head officed in Regina, and I'm here, and I'm proud to be here, although I have operations in 5 continents, and I'm leaving tomorrow for Dubai, right? But at the end of the day, we have to inspire that next generation. We have to attract them into the sector, and we have to retain them. So again, mentoring is key. It's another thing that your members can do within their organization and externally. Is mentoring is again something that I think is very key to develop, in particular that underrepresented group, women, youth, and First Nations. We need to make ourselves available.
Not to toot our own horn, but CAMA does have a mentorship program that we launched last year, which has been quite successful so far. And then also we support some of the universities with student competitions with our sister organization at NAMA in the United States. And so hear you. And I know that we try, even with this presentation and with the generosity of our sponsors, to get more students to come out to these types of events. So it's a great one. Final question here. So I'm going to ask actually for Janice to share her screen again, unmute herself in anticipation. But last question for you. So you mentioned July of last year was your 20th anniversary. Did you ever imagine in the world where you would be today 20 years ago in your basement?
Yeah, people ask that question. I think that anyone who starts up a company that grows to a couple of $1 billion and says they expected it to be that would probably be lying. So, again, I believe that fundamentally, my background was in finance and in business. It wasn't in agriculture, although I grew up in a farming community. It was just fundamental, Robert. I mean, we ultimately were building the acreage of vegetable protein-based crops that fit with cereals and oil seeds in a 3-crop rotation. If we could do it right, we could succeed. The question was how successful. And, again, it's you've got to anticipate where the sector's going, and that's where we are now. If you look at our investments, it's in plant-based protein, renewable fuels, supply chain. Why do we own railways and rail cars? And it's not because we lack things to do. It's because we have to control the infrastructure in order to deliver the food safe, traceable system that the world is going to demand tomorrow. And in my mind, the bulk grain handling industry has went to fair average quality commingled grain, and that ultimately isn't going to be what the higher end markets of the world are going to demand.
Thank you, Murad. I'll turn it back over to Janice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Murad. That was excellent. In lieu of a speaker gift, CAMA will be making a donation to the Canadian Agribusiness Education Foundation and their Pathways to Agri-Food scholarships.
Great.
Each year, that fits, right?
Yeah.
Each year, 7 $2,500 scholarships are awarded to students in college, university, or apprenticeship trade that are pursuing an agricultural-related education. We're encouraging students to obtain a career in agriculture. Thanks again for our webinar series sponsors, 6P Marketing Industries Canada and, 6P Marketing, Protein Industries Canada, and Top Crop Manager. And thank you to everyone for participating today and for supporting CAMA. If you'd like to learn more about CAMA, go to our new website at cama.org. And thank you for your support today. And thank you again, Murad.